What is going on with the stock market? Will the stock market crash in 2019? That is a great question. So in today's video, I'm going to be talking all about the market, how it's been doing, and where I think it's going to be headed this year. But to start with, you guys probably already know, but just to state it really fast, is that nobody really knows exactly, where the stock market's going to go, what it's going to look like. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot more insanely rich stock investors around. But a lot of this is going to be based on my personal experience, historical things that have happened, and just things that have already happened and what I think. This is a relatively brand new channel, so if you're new here, it'd be really cool if you could subscribe and like to this. Since it is a brand new channel, it also means that it's going to be bursting with a ton of ideas for new content to come. So stay tuned and we'll start the video. So in 2017 into most of 2018, we've had probably one of the most incredibly bullish runs in the stock market. Especially, I know that personally, as a huge fan of many of the tech stocks, we've seen a massive boom in so many tech stocks that have been making lots of waves in development. I know for me personally, I was personally a huge fan of the stock Nvidia, and despite what most people probably say about diversification, which I absolutely do agree with, I think that when I see a stock that I just really believe in, I like to kind of just put a lot of a very large percentage of my cash into it. I don't want to say what percentage I put into it, but I know that in this case for me, my most dominant holding was definitely Nvidia, and then of course, to diversify, a lot of my other stocks was basically scattered around other tech stocks like Microsoft, Square, MU, Shopify, Facebook. It was just basically distributed into all of that, and of course I did actually look and put some cash briefly into stuff like real estate, finance, and entertainment, a lot of the other industries. But that's probably the general distribution I went to. So if we're gonna focus on one stock, just because it kind of represents many of the other tech stocks, I know towards the very end of 2018, we started to see major waves of just crashing starting to repeatedly happen, and I know Nvidia, just to look at one stock for example, it basically reset itself, where it stood at around $150 in the summer of 2017, which is actually right around when I entered into it, and it basically pumped and had an absolutely crazy bullish run, rising to almost $300 by early fall of 2018, but then suddenly over just the next couple of months plummeting over probably only about 3 months to now relapsing all the way back down to right around $150 as of right now, about 1.5 years later today, which is Sunday, January 20th, 2019 as I'm recording this. But there's many other tech stocks, and most of them have basically experienced about the same exact pattern, rising from early 2017 all the way pumping up and then peaking right around early fall, and then basically recently just collapsing all the way downwards. I think that generally the more pumped up the stock generally rose up and spiked during that early time period when the stock prices were going up, the more it actually, I guess, the energy just plummeted and pulled it back. Personally, after seeing the massive bull run that we've currently had in 2018, I personally think that the stock market needs to settle down a little bit. So to answer that question is that I do indeed believe that the stock market will crash by the end of this year. And in a lot of ways it actually already has, but I predict it's going to crash even more. And I use a lot of graphs that I'll try to use as examples to just show general trend lines. Is that the thing is that if you look at the general NASDAQ, Dow Jones, and stock market over the last couple of decades, you'll see that the stock market generally moves a little bit like a spring. It rises, crashes, and that's exactly what it's supposed to be doing. But most of the crashes, if you've ever looked at it, you'll notice that they generally appear around once every about 10-year cycle. Our last crash was in about 2008, 2009. So now in 2019, which is about right around 10 years now. If you follow historical trends, and many people have basically already noticed it, we're basically at that time period right now. And even if we wanted to have more reasoning to speculate, say for example, because of course, as we know, just because it happened in the past does not mean it's going to happen now. The other reason why we can kind of speculate that is that whenever you see a stock rapidly rise really, really fast, especially if the pump is so drastic and that it doesn't necessarily correspond to what that company has specifically accomplished. So what I'm really trying to get here is that whenever you see a stock just rapidly rise, and a lot of that rise has to just do with a lot of investors just coming in or just built up hype, you'll often see a correction come up. And I think that's just naturally what it's supposed to be. It's because the stock is overvalued, and you start to see the stock simply just settling in after having that massive upward spike. A lot of these stocks have basically had massive booms, and if you look at how massively, the incredibly high amount of percent that these stocks have, that the majority of these large cap major stocks have basically gone up, you'll know that a correction is basically not even coming, it's basically already happened. And I think that to even greater follow historical trends, but also to basically correct to what I think many of these stocks really should be valued, that crash very, very likely is going to come soon. It already has, and I think that it's been far from reaching the floor. We don't know where the floor is going to be. We don't know where the support level is going to be. But in terms of what I think is best is I personally think at a time like this, the best move would probably be to basically hold on to whatever stock you have, unless it's truly a stock that you really just don't believe in, or you basically know more or less that it's gonna really crash and that it's not a company that's particularly doing anything particularly innovative, and that it's basically not only going to crash, but very, very likely it's basically potentially over. I'm thinking about a lot of retail companies, and probably the most recent one that I'm thinking, well, not that recent anymore, but is MoviePass, maybe. Yeah. So in terms of which stock I think is best to own right now, I personally think that many of the stocks, many of the tech. Now, in terms of which stock is best to own, I personally still think that even with the recent crash, and in fact, especially with the recent crash because of that, I think that many of the tech stocks that have a lot of innovative plans, AI, NVIDIA comes to mind again. I would even argue MU, even AMD. I think those are very, very great stocks to potentially look into buying right now. I think if we're looking for more safer stocks, there's always Visa, MasterCard. Microsoft is a very, very great stock. I personally highly recommend. They're coming out with a lot of stuff like cloud. Adobe's another really, really great one. And Amazon is a stock that I see massive potential. I mean, they've already basically revolutionized and entered almost every major industry. E-commerce, video streaming, music, Kindle books. With that said, I think that Amazon is an incredibly great stock to own, but I do think that it's a little bit still overvalued right now just because of how much it's pumped. I also think that the other thing about Amazon stock is that even though it's a stock that has a lot of potential, when you have a stock that's priced at over $1,000 a share, the thing is, I think that especially for many, many new investors who probably don't have the cash to physically pay $1,000 per share, it may not necessarily be the best stock, just purely out of budget reasons. If you had a massive, several, tens of thousands of dollars, maybe you could consider it. But I think that generally the idea, I think, is that many of the large cap stocks, many of the big name tech stocks, those are probably really, really good ones to look into. I think if you do want a little bit more security though, definitely Visa and MasterCard. But for significantly the absolute most amount of security, I personally think at this point in time, you should probably look into mutual funds. Vanguard does a really, really great job with that. I actually personally think you probably should already be diversified into mutual funds and index funds, so not just purely in stocks. But in terms of what I think is the best move going back to it, is that I think that at this point in time, because I still foresee a potential crash coming, and because I still see the stock market reaching even lower support levels, I would probably say that the best move would be to hold on to whatever you currently have, unless you've researched a particular stock and can easily see that it's probably going to plummet and be very unlikely to recover. So again, I'm looking at probably most retail-based stores. I'm looking at MoviePass has already had that happen. I'm thinking that holding is probably best, and in fact, the best move would probably be at this time is to just basically raise up your savings account and prepare to buy. Because I think that while we don't know what the floor is, I think that we're very, very far from it. And I think that until a certain level, a lot of this is going to be based on gut. It's going to have to be based on your kind of speculation, what you think it is. So I would probably say that in this current market, I mean, it's fair to say that if you really wanted to buy right now would even be a pretty decent time to buy, because I think that regardless of what you're probably thinking, with many of these tech stocks that have a lot of potential, or just flat out finance, whatever stock it is, a lot of these that have a lot of potential, whatever price you pay today, you're basically already ahead of whatever price the people that bought that same exact stock several months ago got it in. And so I think because no one can time the market, I personally do think, though, is that the absolute best move for me, what I'm doing, is probably to raise up a savings account, wait a little bit, and then probably, if I had to call a date, I would probably say late this year. So several months later this year, if the prediction goes through and it does actually crash, that is when that savings account that we've built up, we take that money and we basically buy and increase our position in the stock market. But nonetheless, I think is that I personally think there's still a lot of room to move. I think that we have definitely not reached support levels. I use a lot of graphs and lines to basically just, again, speculate that. And I think it's just something we have to prepare for. But otherwise, again, you should probably be doing it anyway. Diversify, look into regular index and mutual funds, look into Vanguard, and that's probably a great idea if you're looking for something more stable. And prepare for a lot of buying potentially coming up when things go on sale, everything's discounted, and this is potentially a great time to enter in. So with that said, I didn't want to make this video way too long. This is my first video on investing, and I'm hoping again to make my channel probably centered more around business and self-help videos. So I think that this is pretty relatable to it. I mean, a lot of people into business are into investing also. So hopefully if you did enjoy this, please subscribe, like, if not, feel free to share a comment or any suggestion on things I could improve for next time. Again, we're definitely open to it since this is a brand new channel. Everything's all greatly appreciated, and hope you can stay around for the next video. And take care.